but it is about time. I will pull up the draft. And Scott, without further ado,
all right,
get this thing started.
I'm hitting play.
All right, first draft is up and running. Head-to-head points mock over on CBS. I will read off some of the rules and regulations just so you know everything that's going on here. Chris, you are drafting third. Scott, you're drafting fifth. I am drafting sixth. I randomized the draft order, so we're not spread out. We're all right next to each other. There's going to be lots of sniping and crazy things going on, so we will see exactly how that works out. This is a 21-round draft, shallower lineups, 9 starting hitters, 1 of each infield position, 3 outfielders, 1 utility. Then we have 5 starting pitchers, 2 relievers, and 5 bench spots. The scoring format on CBS for hitters, 1 point for each of a single, walk, run, RBI, hit by pitch, 2 points for a double or stolen base, 3 for a triple, 4 for a homer, negative half a point for a hitter strikeout, and for pitchers, 3 points per inning, 3 points for a quality start, 7 for a win or save, half a point for a pitcher strikeout, -1 for each of a walk, earned run, hit allowed, or hit by pitch, and -5 for losses. The first 4 picks of this draft were Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt, Shohei Ohtani, and Jose Ramirez. Scott, you are up.
Yeah, those picks are pretty much by the book. It's a little interesting that we didn't see Bobby Witt drop below 2. I actually rank him third in this format. Nothing new came out about his forearm today that I saw.
Nope.
The Royals said they were going to reevaluate him in the morning after X-rays were negative. I presume no news is good news as far as that goes. And so I would say continue to draft him as planned. I'm going with Juan Soto here at pick 5.
I knew I wasn't going to get him, and I was a little surprised that he lasted all the way to 5. I mean, probably should be the 4th pick. Jose Ramirez is awesome as well. I will go ahead and take Kyle Tucker, who upped the walk rate last year. OBP was great. He's in a contract year, traded over to the Cubs this offseason. So we're just hoping he picks up where he left off, and he could be that player once again.
The plate discipline increase for Kyle Tucker, I think, last year, it was a near even strikeout to walk ratio, right? And that makes him look even more attractive in this format than years past. I think it makes sense that he goes this high if he can sustain that. And of course, that's the reason Juan Soto is a 5th round pick, or I mean, the 5th overall pick in this format, or maybe he should even be 4th overall. When you might see him go toward the end of round 1 in a 5x5 roto league. Juan Soto, more walks than strikeouts basically every year. It helps to set him apart in a points league.
I will say, I did the best and worst values in every round for yesterday's newsletter, and do you guys think Juan Soto is maybe overvalued in roto this year? I think he's up to like 6th over the last couple of weeks, and I get that the floor is super high.
He's a 4-category stud, right?
Yeah, but I
get what you're saying. Is there
injuries aside
between him and Yordan Alvarez?
Yeah, like isn't Yordan Alvarez a better bet for batting average and power if they play this number of games?
You can't put the injury aside for a guy with chronic knee issues in his 20s.
Yeah, and Soto is incredibly durable. So from that perspective, I mean, it's almost night and day. You expect Soto's going to play 150-plus games with his eyes closed this season. So, I mean, is that worth, I'm looking right now over the past week, Juan Soto 6.8 and Yordan Alvarez 16.7. So is it worth 10 picks of value? Maybe. That's security. It might be. I'm not sure.
I would more go to say Yordan Alvarez is undervalued in drafts than Soto personally. But it depends how much you in roto. We're getting into roto analysis here in a points draft, but it depends how much how urgent you feel the steals need is, I suppose.
Yeah. After I selected Kyle Tucker at 6, there was Mookie Betts at 7, followed by Yordan Alvarez, Corbin Carroll, Gunnar Henderson, Paul Skeens, Vlad Jr., and into round 2 now, Francisco Lindor and Tarek Skubal. So Gunnar Henderson's been a big talking point, dealing with the intercostal strain. Believe we all lowered him down to around 9th or 10th. He goes 10th in this draft, which probably makes sense given what we know right now, right?
Yeah, that's where we have him. I'm a little surprised at Vladimir Guerrero going 12th. This feels like not his best format. And, obviously his best attribute is batting average, and that's wasted in a points league. There's no direct rewards for that. I suppose he manages the strikeout rate well, but just to give you an idea, as good as Vladimir Guerrero was, second best year of his career, 3.57 points per game. Francisco Lindor, who the same guy paired him with at the round 1-2 turn, 3.72. So kind of a typical year for Lindor, and he was 0.2 of a point better than Vladimir Guerrero in what was one of the best years of his career.
Yeah. Now we do have the 2021 season for Vlad that we can point to and say he has best player in fantasy upside, but that's 4 years ago. And last year he did play at that level for about 4 months. Frank, if you have the date that he got his haircut,
it was sometime in June. I don't have it available right now.
But we've also seen more years than not where he's just kind of a guy. You know, even in a head-to-head points league, he doesn't walk, like he doesn't strike out very much. He also doesn't walk very much. He's a pretty aggressive hitter, so he's more like an average walk rate guy.
I rank him first at first base for this format, Vladimir Guerrero, but I would say both Bryce Harper and Freddie Freeman probably have more upside in this format than Guerrero does. They're both coming off kind of down years for them.
Yeah.
Well, Guerrero's coming off one of his best. Anyway, he wasn't going to go that much later than 12, but just wanted to put that out there. He's another player who loses value in points leagues.
After Tarek Skubal, there was Bryce Harper, Zach Wheeler, Freddie Freeman. Ellie De La Cruz falls down a little bit in a points league. I think that makes sense. Maybe this was a little bit further than we usually see him fall in a head-to-head points draft. Ellie De La Cruz goes 18th overall. I was kind of hoping he would make it to me, but
me too.
He did not. And I have a little dilemma here because I have Kyle Tucker with my first pick. He's an outfielder. Top of my board is Fernando Tatis. Do I want to clog 2 outfield spots right away, or do I take Trey Turner to lock in the shortstop? Maybe I'm overthinking this one, but I found myself missing out on elite shortstops in this format, and I don't want to do that again. So I'm going to go take Trey Turner ahead of Fernando Tatis. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Tatis just isn't his best format. I think it's totally defensible for him to go in the middle of the second round, but I opted to take Trey Turner just because I want to lock in a better shortstop. Don't want to clog those outfield spots. Scott, you are up. Will you take Fernando Tatis?
Yeah, I faced the same dilemma after taking Juan Soto with my first pick. I think I'm going to do something a little unconventional, though. I think I'm going to make things spicy here at 2:45 from my perspective in the morning. And so it's not just that I've already have one outfielder and the top players remaining are outfielders. It's that they're roto coded outfielders. You know, I want impact from every spot in a points league. I'm going to reach a little, and I'm going to take William Contreras.
Ooh, not where I thought you were going to go, but if you want to get him, there was no guarantee he would be there in the middle of the third round. So no,
it's definitely earlier than I've ever taken him before, and I guess we're going to see if it's a little bit of an experiment. I've never faced these particular options in round 2 in a points league, and just kind of been, I don't know. I feel like the person who makes it back to me in round 3 is going to be somebody I might have considered here in round 2. And meanwhile, I might have missed out on William Contreras if I waited. So we'll see.
Scott, can you look something up for me?
Sure.
How did Fernando Tatis in points per game compare to Vlad Jr. last year?
I believe he was higher, but I believe they're both unimpressive. So yeah, not quite a bit higher than J-Rod. Tatis was 3.1.
No, Vlad Guerrero is who I was asking to compare Fernando to.
Oh, Vlad Guerrero. I'm sorry. Tatis was 3.13. Guerrero was 3.57.
Okay. That's a big grab. Yeah.
But Tatis wasn't at his best, and Guerrero was close to his best.
Yeah. Chris, you must have been smiling from ear to ear when you saw both Scott and I pass on Fernando Tatis. He is a player I know you typically do like.
Yeah. I mean, even in a down year, getting 3.13 points or whatever per game is really solid, because that'll get you to right around that 500 point mark that we're looking for from a second round pick. And obviously we know, you have to go back to 2021, which is as far as you have to go back for Vlad's best season, but he has 550 plus point potential. So I'm happy to see it. I didn't have an outfielder yet.
Tatis is sort of where Vlad was last year, where it's like, oh, the data keeps saying he should be better. Yeah. We finally saw it come through for Vlad. So the hope is it does for Tatis. That's why his value remains high. Okay. I'm up again.
You are up, Scott, and I will catch people up on some picks here. After you took Contreras, there was Ketel Marte, Tatis to Chris, Jackson Churio, and then Jarren Duran into round 3, Corey Seager, Ronald Acuna, Corbin Burns also to Chris, and then Julio Rodriguez, who does take a bit of a hit in this format, falling to the middle of the 3rd round. That might be a little bit too far for him to fall.
I came within one pick of what I thought would happen after taking William Contreras last round.
And just for some context, in 2023, Julio Rodriguez scored 556.5 points in this format, which is basically a late first rounder. So if you think he can get back to that level, it's a phenomenal pick. Yeah.
The problem was last year, Julio Rodriguez averaged 2.69 points per game,
which is on the verge of
not being startable. Yeah. Well, it was 3.50 from July on. Mm-hmm. He got injured for his hopeful resurgence. So it may have just been a bad timing there, but that does show it's a little bit of a precarious format for Julio Rodriguez. I do follow it up, the Rodriguez pick, with a roto-coated outfielder, but one with some versatility in Jazz Chisholm, who already has third base eligibility and could pick up second base. Well, presumably will pick up second base. So, I think I like how that turned out. Chisholm as my 3rd pick, William Contreras as my 2nd. It would be interesting to know if somebody would have taken William Contreras in that pick 21 to 28 range, so that I couldn't have had him. But as things stand now, I'm happy with the way that turned out.
I also want to point out, with regards to Julio Rodriguez, he's already gotten 31 plate appearances this spring. He has talked about wanting to get as many opportunities as he can this spring, either in, Grapefruit League games, or he's playing on the backfields more often. He just wants to avoid the slow starts that have plagued him throughout his career. That's the plan for the Mariners and Julio Rodriguez. And he does have 3 doubles and 3 homers in 11 games. So far, so good.
After Chris selected Corbin Burns, there was Julio Rodriguez, as we mentioned. Scott took Jazz Chisholm. Very interesting. I selected Matt Olson. The next pick was Logan Gilbert. So I was debating between those two in particular, Olson versus Logan Gilbert. See if I regret passing on the starting pitcher. But I'm just thinking of all the Points League mock drafts we've done where I either wind up with a bad shortstop or a bad first baseman, and I just didn't want to do that again. And
it's easy.
We just spoke yesterday on our position preview updates about passing on the 3rd round third baseman, because there are other really good third basemen in this format, like the Bregmans and other names that go later on. So that's why I didn't wind up taking Austin Riley or Manny Machado either.
And it's kind of the opposite at shortstop, where the best players in shortstop are going to be good at both, right? There's a bunch of first rounders at that position, or first 3 rounders, but you look at like CJ Abrams, he's way better in roto. O'Neal Cruz, probably much better in roto. And even the safer fallback options like Ezekiel Tovar, Jeremy Pena, those guys,
useless,
pretty bad in a points league. Yeah. So I think shortstop's actually a position you do have to be pretty conscious of as you're drafting in a head-to-head points league.
Just getting back to that third base point, where everybody behind Jose Ramirez, Austin Riley, Jazz Chisholm, they're all better geared for roto player because of plate discipline. Let's throw 2025 out because it was a weird year for both Riley and Bregman. 2024, those two averaged exactly the same amount, 3.33 points per game. And you're going to be able to get Bregman a lot later. Bregman's not the only one. Isaac Paredes averaged 3.06 points per game 2 years ago. So the mid round third base options tend to be better for points leagues, while the early round third base options tend to be better for roto.
After I selected Matt Olson, there was Logan Gilbert, Austin Riley, Jackson Merrill, Jose Altuve, Emmanuel Clase, and Rafael Devers with the last pick of round 3, 36th overall. He has been falling in drafts recently, has yet to appear in a spring game. Are you guys okay with this fall? Does this make sense here? Rafael Devers at the 3-4 turn.
I think it's fine. Yeah. I still have him ahead of Machado, and Machado's the second best player available on my board. So I think this is exactly right for Devers.
Yeah, he hit a home run off of Walker Buehler in a intra-squad scrimmage today.
Yeah, but that's not hard to do. It's Walker Buehler.
I mean, fair. My Red Sox, we've talked a lot about the Yankees problems this spring. Red Sox have 3 of their projected opening day starters on the IL to open the or will be on the IL with Lucas Giolito's hamstring injury. So that's another team where, like, is Walker Buehler the number 2 starter for the playoff contending Boston Red Sox? That's not great. That's not ideal. It's not what you want. But yeah, look, we've talked about it. The Devers situation is really hard to parse because how much of it is actually just his shoulder's not right? How much of it is him not being happy about likely plan to move him off third base? How much of it is like everyone's just like, hey, you're not healthy, so that when we put you at DH, we can say it's because you're not healthy and not because we think you're a terrible defensive player? If it's the latter and Rafael Devers is fine, it could be one of the steals of the draft.
A lot of interesting picks here.
Yes, after Rafael Devers, we're into the 4th round. Chris Sale, Alex Bregman, and Kyle Schwarber. So my idea of passing on third base because I can get Alex Bregman later, it wasn't really that much later. This is a little bit earlier, Scott, than we're used to seeing Bregman go, even in this format.
Well, that's what happens when we're talking about him during a draft and saying how he might be available later. Somebody goes and makes sure that doesn't happen. Interestingly, I'm kind of pivoting away from Bregman here. So if you wanted to say something, Chris.
No.
The same guy who took Bregman with his round 3 pick just before the Rafael Devers, somebody else took Rafael Devers. He took Emmanuel Clase with the 35th overall pick in a points league draft. And sometimes we see him go that high, round 3, in those really deep roto leagues where saves are very scarce. No way I'd do that in a points league. Like, you know me, in a points league, only 2 relief pitcher spots to fill between 12 teams, and a lot of those are going to be filled by relief pitcher eligible starting pitchers. So there are going to be save sources left over. I might wait till the very end of my draft to take a couple of them. I think there's a time where it makes sense to reach up for an elite guy like Clase, but probably not till like round 7 or 8. And he goes in round 3. So just, yeah, wouldn't be my approach.
Yeah.
The last couple picks, Manny Machado, followed by Cole Reagans, and then Garrett Crochet, who I was thinking about taking if he made it to me, just because I never see him go this late, even in a points league draft. I think as long as he's healthy, he will be treated like an ace starting pitcher and be allowed to go 6-ish innings on a per start basis for the Red Sox this season. Up to this point, I have an outfielder, a shortstop, and a first baseman, Tucker, Trey Turner, and Matt Olson. I'm going to go ahead and grab a starting pitcher. Framber Valdez, someone I think excels in this format. He gives you lots of innings per start, and entering a contract year with the Astros. Still on a good team, should get some wins. He regularly gives a lot of quality starts as well. So happy to take him here as my SP1. So a bit of a pitching run as we approach you, Scott. What's the pick?
Yeah, I'm thinking about a pitcher too. Thinking about it. Round 4 is usually earlier than I want to go, but I'm not thrilled with the hitter selection overall. I think, though, I'm going to go with a hitter to avoid the first base problems you referred to, Frank. It is a position where in shallower lineup leagues like this, you could get boxed out and end up with an unappealing starter, someone who you're kind of forced to start rather than really eager to start. I'm going to take Pete Alonso here. He's coming off a down year.
Snipe, snipe, pew, pew.
But
you're still pretty good in this format.
Typically, Pete Alonso is like 3.3, 3.4 points per game. Last year, it was like 2.9. But yeah, I think for being such a big power hitter, he strikes out less than you think.
And if you buy any of the talk that he has studied his swing from the postseason to make better swing decisions this season, I'm not sure I completely buy that, but something to prove once again. It's back-to-back career years, contract years, for Pete Alonso. So hoping to have a big one and get back on the market next offseason. The next pick was Adley Rutschman. Chris, did you just react to that?
No, it was the Pete Alonso pick that I reacted to. I was planning on taking him because this is the problem when you draft Shohei Ohtani is the top players on my board are probably Marcell Ozuna and Brent Rooker. And I considered doubling up on Brent Rooker, just going totally galaxy brain and just maybe he gets outfield eligibility early on. I did go and check. Mike Kurland does a really good spreadsheet every spring tracking every team's lineup. And Brent Rooker did play in the outfield yesterday on Wednesday for the first time this spring. It was his first appearance in a game. I would felt better about it if he had made like 2 or maybe 3 or even 4 appearances in the outfield. Because if it's once every 15 or so games, it's going to take a while for him to get outfield eligibility. So yeah, that's, I just couldn't quite do it, but I do think he's clearly the best hitter left.
Okay.
I consider one of the util-only bats, too. I usually like Schwarber in the 4th round of this format because his OBP and walks are just so awesome.
Yeah.
But I did want to get that starting pitcher. I think it's a fine time to take either one. And we just saw Marcell Ozuna go 47th. Chris, you selected Ozzy Albies, and then Dylan Cease, the last pick of round 4. We're into round 5. Scott, I feel like I might have cut you off. I'm sorry. What do you have?
No, it's fine. I was just going to catch up people on the picks.
All right. Well, go ahead.
Chris took Ozzy Albies, then Marcell Ozuna went right after. Dylan Cease was the pitcher I was considering. He goes at the end of round 4, paired with Marcus Semien, who's better in points leagues, I would say. 49 still feels a little early. And there goes Wyatt Langford at 50. I was getting excited. I had a chance to take Wyatt Langford for once. Unless you were going to take him here, Chris.
We're finally doing a draft without Doc Eisenhower, so we can see where Wyatt Langford normally goes, and it's pick 50, the second pick of round 5.
He is points league coded too, I would say. And actually, for as bad as he was for 5 months last year, he finished with a higher point per game average than both Jackson Chourio and Jackson Merrill for the season. His was higher, Wyatt Langford. Now, if you just isolate the best portions of the season for Chourio and Merrill, which we often do when we're talking about them, they were better for those stretches. But, we're not isolating Wyatt Langford's best portion September. And he was pretty great during that.
And
you know what? Jackson Merrill was slightly better than Langford. They were almost equal in points per game, but Langford was better than Chourio.
I feel like once we see Wyatt Langford go, we're almost certainly about to see James Wood go, and that's exactly what you did, Chris.
And, he's going to strike out a lot. That's the primary knock against James Wood in a points league. And I think he will be better for Roto. He wasn't terrible for points last season. It wasn't quite 3 points per game. It was probably like 2.9, just eyeballing it.
2.82, I believe.
Yeah, like for a guy that we expect to take a step forward, that's not bad. He walked a lot. He was on like an 80 walk pace last season. We've talked about his kind of middling game power because he doesn't lift the ball. Well, there were a lot of doubles in there, and there are going to be some triples because he's super fast too. So I think James Wood could be a sneaky option, and I just didn't want to go pitcher here. That's the primary issue. And if I thought Brent Rooker was going to have outfield eligibility early on in the season, I would have done what Scott or Frank just did.
And after you selected James Wood, there was Blake Snell, Michael King to Scott, and I took Brent Rooker. I was so nervous that one of you guys, well, I guess, Chris, you weren't going to do it after you talked about it, but I was really nervous, Scott, you were going to take Brent Rooker. You didn't. Mm-hmm. You wound up going with Michael King. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
That was the debate, King or Rooker. Rooker was great last year, obviously. Mm-hmm. He averaged 3.42 points per game. But I do think he's going to give some of that back, especially in batting average. And he strikes out close to 30% of the time. I feel like it would be it wouldn't take much of a slide statistically for Rooker to go from being a really good starter like he was last year to just kind of a decent starter. And meanwhile, we might see in a smaller lineup league like this, we might see some pretty attractive hitters slide because they're already blocked in that lineup spot across the 12 different teams. And so I kind of wanted to leave utility open. That was more of a secondary aspect, but it's like, if I don't know, someone who I really like in this format, like Brandon Nimmo, let's say, or Jurickson Profar, if I've already filled my outfield in there, they're very late. It would be nice to be able to stick them in a utility spot. So I took my first pitcher, Michael King, instead, and we'll see what pitchers make it back to me. Maybe I'll take another.
Well, the next pick right after Brent Rooker was one Junior Caminero.
Caminero! Ha! Ha, Caminero!
55th overall. The rise continues on Junior Caminero, popular breakout candidate this season, followed by Pablo Lopez. Chris, the helium on some of these breakout guys, we see it every spring. We spoke about Caminero yesterday. The ADP over the past week, I believe, was 69.5. Goes even higher here, 55th overall.
And not necessarily. If Caminero is as good as we think he is, he's going to be good in any format. But he's not one of these guys that has like precocious plate discipline. He didn't strike out very much. He also didn't walk very much in the minor league level. So it not necessarily the reach I would make, but I can totally see it working out.
I don't really understand why. Maybe I do understand why Junior Caminero is rising so much, because somebody wrote such a catchy song about him, but wrote it and performed it. But like what has happened? He had a 2-homer game this spring. One of those home runs was kind of a cheapie that wouldn't have made it out in many venues. Other than that, there hasn't been a lot of like external factors contributing to his rise up the rankings. So I'm a little surprised it continues, especially in this format, given the number of third basemen that excel in this format. 55. Look, he's priced out of my range at 75, as much as I thought I was going to like him back in October when I made that song. But here, he just keeps moving up draft boards, and I'm not. I love the upside. I think it's Austin Riley like, but just because a guy has premium exit velocities and a not so terrible strikeout rate, so did Jordan Walker. Like, it could go wrong.
Yeah.
After Pablo Lopez, we got Vinny P.
Baby.
Vinny Pasquantino, Shota Imanaga, O'Neal Cruz, and Lawrence Butler, another popular breakout this season. This was the round for the breakouts. Round 5, we got Butler, Caminero, James Wood, Wyatt Langford. First pick of round 6 is Teoscar Hernandez. The only, I guess, counter I would bring up to taking like a Caminero or a breakout candidate in this range is the player pool feels kind of flat at this point. Maybe you guys feel differently, but if there's someone that you feel really passionate about, or you really feel convicted that they're going to have a big season, I think you can make the case just because the player pool feels a little bit more flat at this point in the draft.
No, I get what you're saying. I think that's a good argument in principle. I would say my response to that in head-to-head points drafts is this is where I load up on pitcher. Once all the like MVP caliber bats are gone and the hitter pool especially flattens like you're talking about. Okay, here's where I pile on pitchers. Brent Rooker may have been the last one of those MVP caliber bats that you took, Frank, and I took King one spot. Michael King, my first pitcher, one spot ahead of that. But in theory, probably going to go pitcher the next few picks. We'll see how quickly they get scooped up, though.
All right, go ahead, Chris.
I do want to point out with Junior Caminero, part of it is he went bonkers in the Caribbean Series postseason. He played 21 games for Escogido. He had a 12.23 OPS, 12 walks, 7 strikeouts, 4 home runs in 22 games. So he does have 7 homers in his last 31 games. including spring training and the Caribbean Series, which is what you're hoping for. I'm not saying it's a great idea.
Sure.
And I think a lot of it is just kind of the helium, as we like to say, that huge bomb he hit in the walk-off home run he hit in the Caribbean Series is certainly part of it. That might have accounted for like 15 picks worth of rise by itself. But yeah, he was going like outside of the top 100 before January. And he's going to be probably a top 60 pick before we're done. This happens every year, though.
Yes, it certainly does. After Luis Castillo, there was Aaron Nola, Max Fried, CJ Abrams, and Jacob deGrom. I am up. Let's check out what I have. Matt Olson, Trey Turner, Kyle Tucker, and then Brent Rooker and Framber Valdez. So few different needs here. I'm going to go ahead and take someone who I feel like has lasted longer than he usually does. And I understand that there's injury risk. I don't usually draft Yoshinobu Yamamoto, but I will take him here as my SP2. I have that kind of insurance built in with Framber Valdez as my SP1. And I do think when Yamamoto pitches, he will be treated like an ace. He'll be allowed to go 6 innings frequently. Will he go much more than that? Probably not, but I do feel okay with him as my SP2 in round 6.
Yeah, I'm surprised you went with Yamamoto versus another pitcher who I'm going to take here right afterward. And I know you like him even more than I do. I think Logan Webb is even better suited for this format because of the volume he regularly provides. Over 200 innings last year, even though he wasn't at his best. I was also catching up on some box scores the other day. Took a little break from writing to catch up on box scores, and that cutter he's introduced this spring. His last start Monday, he had 10 whiffs on 64 pitches, 4 of them on that cutter. He introduced it very late last season, so late that for his season count, it was only like 3% of his arsenal, but he threw 20% cutters in that start, and that might be something that allows Logan Webb to take another leap, maybe become more of a strikeout pitcher. I'm pretty excited about it.
All right, last couple picks after I took Yamamoto, Logan Webb, Christian Yelich, Josh Naylor. I totally thought about taking Logan Webb. Scott, I hear everything that you just said, and maybe in this format that does make a little bit more sense. I agree. I like the cutter. I like what we've seen from that. And maybe I need to just move Logan Webb up a little bit in this format so that does make sense, especially as an SP2. But I guess I was shooting for a little bit more per game upside there with someone like Yamamoto. Chris, you selected Josh Naylor and then Cody Bellinger. So back-to-back first baseman here. How do you feel about Josh Naylor? Because I'm a little bit more down on him. I feel like Scott's all right with it. How do you feel about Naylor this season?
I think he's going to get a lot of RBI in that lineup. And the nice thing about Josh Naylor for this format is he's another guy who does not strike out very much. And over his career, we've seen some inconsistency, right? 256, 308, 243 batting average the past 3 years. 20 homers, 17 homers, 31 last year. I don't think he's a 31 homer guy. I think he might just be like 110 RBI guy in that lineup because he's going to make a lot of contact. He's going to get a lot of singles and doubles. I don't know how, Scott brought up a very good point about the park factor in Arizona and how it might not be as bad as we think for him. So I'm okay with him there.
For what it's worth, last year, to show you this is kind of Josh Naylor's format with the low strikeout rate, he averaged more points per game last year than either Pete Alonso or Matt Olson. Down years for Pete Alonso and Matt Olson, but still, I think this is a fine time to take Naylor. If he had made it back to my pick here in round 7, I might have taken him as my utility spot.
After Bellinger at the turn, we got Bryce Miller and Salvador Perez. Tyler Glasnow, round 7. That feels like a good gamble.
I was going to take Glasnow if he was there.
And then, Chris, you did select Zach Gallen. Mike Trout was the next pick. Scott, you're up. But Chris, talk to me about Gallen. This usually is his better format in a points league.
Yeah, Gallen, the only downside to taking Gallen there is he might have made it back the next round. And honestly, might have made it back the next round because everybody's so down on him. His ADP in NFBC drafts over the past 2 weeks is like 130. people are just acting like Zach Allen is dead, and I don't quite get it. I know his velocity has been down this spring. I know last year was bad, but in this format, he was an SP1 in each of 2022 and 2023. He has one weird year where he gets hurt with a hamstring injury, and all of a sudden everybody's just decided Zach Allen's terrible. I don't get it.
All right, after Zach Allen mentioned Mike Trout, Anthony Santander to Scott, and I selected Jordan Westburg. This is not Jordan Westburg's better format. He doesn't walk all that much, but if he breaks out the way that I think we all think he will, then I think he will be someone who averages over 3 fantasy points per game. I don't have second or third base, so it does give me a little bit of flexibility within the draft as well. After
Westburg was 2.89 last year, so it wouldn't take much to get him over 3.
And he was more like an 8 to 9% walk guy in the minors than I think he was 5% last year. So any growth there would help.
And his rookie season, it was around 7%.
Yeah.
So I think he could walk a little bit more. Maybe the OBP comes up for Westburg this season. After him, Roki Sasaki and Wilson Contreras. So some catchers starting to go. Scott, catch us up on your pick. Anthony Santander, round 7. I believe he's your second outfielder.
Yeah, he is. It's the pick I've made so far that I'm least excited about, I would say. It was between him or Bailey Ober as my third starting pitcher, but I just feel like there are going to be, in the rounds to come, a lot more pitchers that I'll like than hitters. Santander is not a guy who walks much. He hit for so much power that last year, 3.22 points per game. I don't think he's going to do that again. If he did, he probably should have gone a round or two earlier. But I think he'll be a little over 3 and just somebody I can plug in and not worry about. But I'll probably hit pitcher pretty hard hereafter.
All right, catching people up on picks, we got Spencer Strider, Michael Harris, Willie Adames, Seiya Suzuki, and then the first pick of round 8 was Justin Steele. I did just see an update come through on Spencer Strider, and the latest that we have here is tracking towards late April debut, which is pretty consistent with everything we've heard. The news has been pretty good on Strider. He's hoping to get into game action soon, so far, so good. Everything we're hearing sounds like late April for Strider. And then I'm seeing an update here on Ronald Acuna as well. Hopes to debut early to mid-May. So some Braves updates, Scott, as you don the jersey here on Megastream Day.
That sounds like the timetable's getting a little later for Acuna, doesn't it?
I always assumed it was early May, but
yeah,
mid-May would push it back a little bit more, I think.
That's a quarter of the season he's missing at that point.
Yep.
Join me. I wrote him up in Bus 2.0, Scott.
I might need to move him down the rankings a little bit.
Yeah, I totally get that. A couple other picks, Tristan Casas, Bailey Ober, Bo Bichette, and Joe Ryan. So, again, in any drafts that you guys participate in, Bo Bichette is not going anywhere close to his current ADP, which is around 110th over the past week or so. He goes 88th in this draft.
I'm gonna make a super timely and relevant reference that everybody here is gonna get. We've all seen the 1970s war epic Patton starring George C. Scott, right? Of course you have. You don't even need to answer. Of course Frank has seen that movie. There's a famous scene where he's in a battle and he beats the other guy in the battle and he's like, I read your book. That's what drafting with people who listen to the podcast is like everybody knows who we like. That you can't get anybody that you actually like when we're drafting with people who listen to us.
Hey, I got Jordan Westburg, Chris. I managed to pull it off somehow, some way. I did it.
For just what it's worth, I don't really like Bo Bichette in this format.
Not a great reference. Not a great pick in this format at that price. I mean, it's fine, but yeah, he's not a great player in this format.
Dang it, Frank.
After Joe Ryan, there was Sandy Alcantara. Wait, I got something on Sandy somewhere.
Sandy? Tell me about it.
And then the very next pick was Spencer Schwellenbach, the best Spencer, who's a starting pitcher for the Atlanta Braves.
We're doing great with the 70s movie references today before all of our time. Spencer Schwellenbach, yeah, I was excited because for once I was going to get a chance to draft him.
No,
I think you always take him earlier than I'm even thinking about it. And this time it was just one pick earlier. Is now appropriate for George Kirby?
I think it's fine.
He is my highest ranked pitcher. And it could be a great value. Yeah, I'm going to do it. George Kirby. You can gamble a little more on injured guys in a shallow format like this because the threshold, the standard for a replacement player on the waiver wire is so much higher, and there's going to be so much roster turnover just because of players we missed in the draft emerging. I don't sweat drafting the injured players as much, particularly when they're that high upside.
All right, after Scott selected George Kirby, there was Hunter Green, Robbie Ray, and Seth Lugo. Robbie Ray went to Chris, and if you're watching the stream, I did the
That's a move up the rankings.
The gift face of the lady who's like, do I like that? Oh, I do like that. Do I like that? Yeah, I do.
So just shout. I'm monitoring the chat, and I will be all day. And someone mentioned that Robbie Ray had an immaculate inning to open his spring start against Marcus Semien, Wyatt Langford, and Jake Berger. Let's just do it. Let's move Robbie Ray up the board based on literally one inning in the spring. Let's screw
it. That's quite a big move, though, Chris.
Yeah.
He has been rising, and he's got that new changeup grip that he learned from Tarek Skubal. This is around, what would you say, around SP 30 at this point? SP 25,
something like that. That sounds right.
Yeah.
So I probably have him.
It's higher than we're used to, for sure.
Yeah. But I do feel like if there's any format to get your guys, this is it, for the same reason I said you can gamble on injured players a little more. The penalty for missing on a pick is much, much lower.
All right, after Seth Lugo, there was Christian Walker. We're now into round 9. Brian Reynolds, Luis Robert, and Devin Williams. Chris, you selected Luis Robert. This is not his typical format, but he fell quite a bit, down to 99th overall.
Yeah, it's not. Look, if he's as bad as he was last year, nothing matters, right? It's complete.
Wow.
Like he's not usable. He's not rosterable if he's as bad as he was last year. He's at 2.3 points per game. But in 2023, he was a must-start player in this format. I still think he has that upside. I'm hoping for better days this year, and he fell. It was the 99th pick. I'm not going to complain about that.
All right, after Luis Robert, there was Devin Williams. Scott, you selected Ian Happ, and I am up. I could use an outfielder.
Ian Happ's good for this format, too, by the way. Walks a lot. Batting average liability doesn't hurt you. 2.95 points per game last year.
I know this is not his format, and he doesn't walk at all, but I'm going to take Yainer Diaz. I feel like this is a pretty big fall for him, and I did not have a catcher yet, so I'll snag Yainer Diaz here and hope that the batting average and the home runs and the counting stats carries his point game total this upcoming season. But I did think about taking an outfielder as well. We'll see who makes it back.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm rethinking the Ian Happ pick now. I should have been paying more attention to my tiers instead of just my rankings here in the draft room.
It's too early to be crying, Scott. Come on.
I'm not crying.
I just meant
cool as a cucumber, Frank.
It was a little play on words.
Look at that. The team cool as a cucumber. Clearly a drafter after my own heart. Takes Brandon Nimmo at pick 104. So that makes me feel better about Ian Happ at 101 because I don't have that injury slide to take advantage of super late with Nimmo.
Now that is a draft pick that will cause some tears. Brandon Nimmo at 104th overall. Right after Riley Green, that was the outfielder I was considering, who not really a name I ever target, but I feel like he's probably better in a points league because for categories, he doesn't run much. He usually gets on base quite a bit. And I would expect him to, mostly be a 4-category player with a solid on-base percentage. So
he and Happ were about the same points per game last year. I just feel like Green has a lower floor because he doesn't have that superlative plate discipline. And for what it's worth, Nimmo was 2.95. He was exactly the same as Happ last year. So this is his format as well. I saw he's DHing today, right? So he's back in games.
Yep.
I've been the optimist with him all along, but normally we're seeing him drop much lower than this in drafts because people worried about the foot and the knee.
Yeah, I think I might have messed up there because we're getting an outfield run and a lot of names that I thought I might be able to get those players next round. And
I chose correctly.
Riley Green, Brandon Nimmo, Steven Kwan. He was someone I was looking at. Then Isak Paredes, okay, third base starting to go. Shane O'Mac, Shane McClanahan.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
And then Josh Hader to finish out round 9. The first 2 picks of round 10, Jason Dominguez and Will Smith. So I tell myself every draft with one catcher, just wait and take catcher later on. And what do? I did the opposite in this draft. So we'll see how it turns out ultimately. And I do apologize if anyone's listening or watching, you hear some rattling in the background. I have some kind of construction going on in my building, and I've got to yell at someone. I've got to let them know. Don't you know it's mock draft Megastream? Come on now.
Jerks Profar at 111. I'm loving the Ian Happ pick now. All my fallbacks go before I get a chance to pick again.
After Jerks and Profar, there was JT Realmuto and Mason Miller. So the elite closer is starting to go off the board here as well. And it's a good reminder that they typically go later in this format. In a categories or roto league, you might see the elite closers go anywhere from rounds like 4 through 7. And they're going here in rounds 9 and 10, which I think is an okay call. This is probably the right time to be targeting them.
I won't be the one taking one. Like if Emmanuel Class A was here, I'd take him. But otherwise, I'm not going to be taking an elite closer. But I'm okay with them going here. I think this is about where I rank them. Around pick 100 to 125, that range of the rankings.
I am up, and I mentioned there was a huge run on outfielders. The top one is someone who specializes in roto. I don't think I want to go that route, even though he is my top-ranked outfielder. You know what? I'm going to go a little bit lower in the rankings and take someone who I think could break out the season. That is Dylan Cruz.
Oh, that's good.
Typically does, maybe we think of him more as like a category league roto player because we're expecting him to run a lot, but the plate discipline was good last year. I think he'll get on base a decent amount. I think overall he'll just improve in his second year. He's likely to bat second in the Nationals lineup, so he'll get a lot of plate appearances. And feels like an appropriate time, round 10. And Dylan Cruz is my second outfielder. Scott, you are up.
No, and I think it's a good time to bring up because you say, stolen bases, that's more of a roto thing. This is a distinction between the CBS head-to-head points format and the ESPN head-to-head points format that you're going to see later today. Stolen base guys are still pretty darn valuable for us with them getting 2 points apiece. Sometimes they actually get overlooked, in fact. But I got to make a pick here. Tanner Bybee's the pick. But on ESPN, they're worth 1 point apiece. So it really it takes a lot of them off the draft board, frankly. It really limits the usable player pool. And that's why I think Ellie De La Cruz in the middle of round 1 was a great pick. That's why I think Dylan Cruz, he might excel at plate discipline too. Here at 115, Frank, great pick. Others like Nico Horner, who we're going to see go later, still a great pick in CBS points leagues. But it'll be less the case in ESPN.
All right, after I selected Dylan Cruz, Scott took Tanner Bybee, then Hunter Brown, Matt McClain to Chris, and then Royce Lewis. Chris, I feel like you're usually down on Matt McClain, but this is further than we see him last. Why Matt McClain here?
Yeah, this is right around where I have him picked. Not sure that any of the other. I think we might be pretty much at the shortstop tier that we talk about. There are a couple of guys left, but yeah, I just think this was the right time. What I don't like is when Matt McClain goes 70th or 80th. That doesn't work out for me. I was hoping, and what I was trying to figure out there was I wanted the combo of Matt McClain and Royce Lewis, and I wasn't sure which one was more likely to make it. Royce Lewis goes the pick after Matt McClain, so might have made the wrong pick there.
Man, I was debating McClain also, McClain or Bybee. But I thought we're coming up on a drop-off at starting pitcher. So I went ahead and took Bybee. McClain, because of how much he strikes out, it worked out well for him 2 years ago, but yeah. I'm not sure if I believe that he can do that again and be a standout in this format. But one of the shortstops I was counting on making it back, really being available for several rounds still, was Xavier Edwards, who, again, because stolen bases are worth 2 points in this format, is more valuable than you think for CBS. In fact, he averaged about as many points per game as Ellie De La Cruz last year. Not going to do that again, but that goes to show you that Xavier Edwards could be a sneaky play in the CBS points format. He goes right before me at pick 124. So I'm going to take another pitcher, Jack Flaherty. You might need to catch us up on the picks, Frank.
Yeah, that's a good pick because I was looking at Jack Flaherty as well. After Chris selected Matt McClain, there was Royce Lewis, Freddie Peralta that finishes out round 10. Then Raisel Iglesias, Sonny Gray, Cal Raleigh, Xavier Edwards, and Jack Flaherty. I was looking at Flaherty. I'm a little bit upset I didn't get that pick, so good one, Scott. But I still need a second or third baseman. I can move Jordan Westberg around. I'm going to go ahead and select Matt Chapman, who was pretty solid in this format last year. He typically does walk quite a bit, and he had the big season in San Francisco, so hoping he can carry that over once again here in 2025. Their lineup should be improved. They got Willy Adames, and we'll see. Will he run as much? That I'm not entirely sure of, but as long as he gets on base and hits 25-ish home runs, I think he should still be pretty good in this format.
Yeah. For what it's worth, Matt Chapman last year, 2.99 points per game. So most of the hitters available now are averaging less than that. I do think that the reduction in strikeout rate to pre-hip surgery levels that we hadn't seen since his Oakland days. I think that was the biggest transformation for Chapman last year versus the stolen base increase. But look, 87th percentile sprint speed. It's not far-fetched. He could keep running. I think it's a good pick at this point. He was my top-ranked player.
After I selected Matt Chapman, there was Nico Horner, who looks like he will be ready for the domestic opening day on March 27th. And then Brenton Doyle, 128th. And that was the outfielder I referred to earlier, who's much better in Roto, strikes out quite a bit, more likely to contribute steals, a lot of them. So, that should help him obviously contribute points in this format. But Brenton Doyle slides all the way down to 128th. Does that sound right, guys, or do you think he slid too far in this format?
I think it's right. He's a tough one for points leagues, not just because of the strikeouts. For reference, 2.84 points per game last year, so not amazing, but certainly startable. What do you do when he's on the road?
Probably just bench him.
Head-to-head league.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, not for maybe not for half a week on the road for the Rockies, but he's when they have a full week on the road, you'd probably rather sit Doyle. And I don't know about you, head-to-head points leagues, I'd like to load up my bench with pitchers. I don't want to have to carry an extra outfielder to platoon Doyle.
By the way, Rafael Devers was quoted today as saying he's fine if he has to play DH.
It's finally coming out.
Yeah, it seemed like things were trending that way.
Yep. After Brenton Doyle, there was Xander Bogaerts, Christopher Sanchez. I took Matt Chapman hoping I think I could get Christopher Sanchez next turn. The answer was I could not. There is a lot of hype pitchers moving up here. Byron Buxton, Jared Jones, and then we're into round 12. Kodai Senga, Luis Arraez, Gavin Williams moving way up the board. Then Carlos
goodness.
and Spencer Arrighetti. There are a lot of pitchers going off the board right now, and I think I only have 3 starters at this point, so I don't love that.
I
Is
hate
the
what just
cucumber
happened
heating
here.
up?
The cucumber is heating up. Not so cool.
It might be heating up a little bit more too.
I want to get Gavin Williams somewhere. I said on last night's pod he could be this year's Chris Sale. What I meant to say was he could be this year's Garrett Crochet. That ended up being
I thought it was a little
conversation.
Weird,
right. Okay.
The point is he's going to be really good, I think, with the way he's transformed his fastball. 135. It's always just a little early. Like somebody in the draft room is just outpacing me slightly on him. Now I got to make a pick.
And you got to do it quick.
I got to make a pick, and I got to do
no more milk in the clock. We got to move.
Yeah, really because we have another draft coming up in 45 minutes.
You know what? Since I'm not thrilled by everything that's here, I'm going to take another big spring riser. I'm not going to let people in his better format beat me to the punch on Clay Holmes.
That's the third time Scott has sniped me.
Boom.
Yeah, he's looked great. That new changeup. I think Chris's worries about him against left-handed batters are now out the window. Great ground ball pitcher. I think it's going to work out well for Clay Holmes in a starting role. And he's relief pitcher eligible, which counts for a lot in this format.
Yeah, it typically goes like past past 200, but in the points league format, it makes sense for him to go much higher than that. So
I kind of hate this range of the draft now.
I wanted to say also, Gavin Williams wasn't the only pick that infuriated me. Right after him was Carlos Correa.
Yes.
I still haven't filled my shortstop spot. I passed up Matt McClain a couple rounds ago to get Tanner Bybee. I was counting on one of Xavier Edwards or Carlos Correa falling really far, and neither of them did. Carlos Correa averaged about as many points per game in this format last year than Trey Turner. Durability issues, I get it, but prior to last year, the previous 3 years averaged 140 games. I think I'd be willing to bet on him in a points league, especially given how far Carlos Correa tends to fall.
I have to imagine everybody's got the shortstop position filled by this point, right?
Yeah, you'd think so. Let me check. I'm
Yep,
the only
you
one.
are the only one without a shortstop.
So maybe hearing us broadcast that, they'll be jerks and start taking shortstops for their bench. But in theory, I can kick back and just take the best of whatever's left at this point.
Let's catch people up on the picks. After, where'd I leave off? Spencer Arrighetti, I think, in the middle of round 12. There was Ryan Helsley. I selected Carlos Rodon, who has not looked good this spring, but last year he was a workhorse, and he's kind of like the last of a tier that I saw at least.
I don't think you worry about Carlos Rodon's spring numbers. That just seems like...
Yeah.
Like I don't feel like we've said enough this year. You shouldn't pay that much attention to spring statistics.
Spring statistics, yes. We can.
By and large, you shouldn't.
I think process you can pay attention to, and you should.
Yeah.
Statistics, I don't really care that much about performance in the spring. Yeah.
After Rodon, Scott selected Clay Holmes, then Kevin Gausman. Chris, you took Alec Boehm. Then Brandon Lau, who goes to the team for the love of the pod. So you have to name your team now for the Lau of the pod. Followed by Bowden Francis, so the next sparp off the board. And then into round 13, Andres Munoz, Nick Pavetta, Yusei Kikuchi to Chris, Jake Berger, and Scott, you are back up.
You know, we got some smart head-to-head drafters here. I still have more hitter spots to fill than I'd like, but they've zeroed in on the head-to-head points league specialists and scooped them all up. So I feel like I get no advantage here by taking a hitter because it's really flat now what's available.
There is one guy who's fallen way past where we have him ranked.
Is it Mark Vientos?
Yeah, but he was worse than Alec Boehm last year in this.
Right. I almost took Boehm. You ended up taking him after I took Clay Holmes. But I didn't, obviously. And that would have been one kind of points coded player who was left. Not amazing in points leagues, Boehm, but better than the average hitter who's available. And Vientos, I don't even think is going to live up to last year's numbers. So I'm taking Jackson Jobe. I'm doing what Chris Towers tends to do in these head-to-head points drafts and trying to gobble up as many of the sparps as I can. I really thought about going Ryan Walker there, taking a conventional closer, because I do think he has a ton of upside in that role. But I think sparps in general in this format have more upside. And like I've been saying all along, every time we do a points league draft, I don't know that investing in a closer, no matter how good he is, gives you that much of an advantage, because there are going to be ones emerging during the season that'll come close enough to replicating that production.
I would guess Walker actually scored a decent amount of points last year, even with 10 wins. I mean, it was only 10 saves to go along with it. He
wasn't a full-time closer.
Yeah. No, I will say Jobe, another spring start today that just wasn't very good, even though the stuff continues to look really good. He's really befuddling me. I am fuddled.
Are you
Jackson
cool
Jobe
as a cucumber over Jackson Jobe?
No, not at all, because I really, really want Jackson Jobe to be a thing, and it just, I don't know. It's a little frustrating. Yeah, today it was 2 earned runs in 3 2/3 innings, 3 strikeouts, 1 walk. He gave up 2 home runs. It was one of them to Paul Goldschmidt, 1 to Jason Dominguez. It just, and I think it was only like 4 or 5 whiffs again on 60 something pitches. So it's just, 3 whiffs on 68 pitches. He should be missing bats.
Yeah.
And he is
talked
not.
about adding the sinker and curveball, and he just hasn't featured them that much.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's weird because, like, in terms of like the movement profile, the cutter should be a good swing and miss pitch. The sweeper, the changeup, like everything should work. And I just don't know what it is. Maybe he's also talked about like just kind of not trying to nibble, not trying to avoid walks, just throwing it in the strike zone. And maybe that's just the approach in the spring, and he'll, see better results when the games matter. But it's frustrating for someone that I am very excited about overall.
After Scott selected Jackson Jobe, I took Ronaldo Lopez, then Spencer Steer, Mark Vientos, Jose Barrios, Adolis Garcia, Felix Bautista, Grant Holmes, another big riser here, and a Sparp in CBS head-to-head points leagues, then Sean Manaea and Jung-Hoo Lee. So lots going on. Scott, I think you paused the draft, but I resumed it because we just have to keep things moving if we want to keep pace with everything else that we've got going on later today. I think two of the bigger names here, Grant Holmes at the end of round 13, and then Scott, your guy, Sean Manaea, who we got some good news on Thursday. Apparently he has started up a throwing program, and maybe he's back by like mid-April.
Well, that was always the timetable. The concern was that oblique injuries can be difficult to get past completely. And if once he starts throwing again, maybe it flares up again, sets him back further. So we'll get a good test here by the time most people are drafting. And if his throwing program is coming along without any setback, I think you can draft Sean Manaea with a good deal of confidence.
It could be more like mid-April. Yeah.
All right. After catching people up on the picks here, after Sean Manaea, I am up. I got to make a pick. Jung-Hoo Lee, Jesus Luzardo, Nick Lodolo, Bryce Terang, Kerry Carpenter. I need an outfielder. I could use a reliever as well. Let's check in on the outfield, see what's going on. All right. There's I think a pretty clear top name here, and I'll go ahead and select Randy Arozarena. Yeah. Typically better in a points league, but he also walks a lot. So
I think he's underrated in points. You said better in a points league. You meant better in a roto. I think he's a little underrated in a points league from 2021 through 2023. I think he was right at 3 points per game, basically. So he's been a must start fantasy outfielder in head-to-head points leagues, and his plate discipline metrics didn't get significantly worse after getting traded to Seattle, which would be the big concern. I've seen a lot of like Randy Arozarena, Victor Robles, like concern about how they'll hit in Seattle, but we already saw there, and they were not great, but Robles was great, but it wasn't like a disaster for any of them.
Yeah, no, I don't think Seattle's going to be the problem for Arozarena, and I know he did bounce back over the final 4 months. I've just never really trusted the profile, and last year kind of underscored why, and he's getting older, and I think it's fine here, don't get me wrong. I don't know that I want to spend draft capital on him at a point when I feel like he's part of the flattening in the hitter ranks right now, maybe a little more upside than what's left, but his downside is he's just unusable in this format.
I will say, I think it's not just the hitter ranks. I think everything's flat at this point in the draft. And so once you're at like round 12 in a points league, it kind of just becomes get your guy, because I think we are at the point across the board. And that's why I took Mike Soroka just now as an RP.
Look at you taking Grayson Rodriguez.
And then Grayson Rodriguez, again, there are
I thought I was going to get him on the way back. I thought I was going to get
very few difference makers left. Might as well take the guy that if this elbow injury becomes a non-issue, he's a difference maker, or at least potentially can be.
You can afford to miss here, like I've been saying. And there's a chance Grayson Rodriguez, I think there's a pretty good chance. In fact, I'd say there's a better than a coins flip chance. Grayson Rodriguez ends up making it back before the end of April. It's been long enough. I'm going to take Ryan Walker.
I mean, anytime you can say a guy's name and then they don't go 2 rounds later, you got to take him.
Yeah.
Let's catch people up here. After I took Randy Arozarena, there was Mackenzie Gore, Merrill Kelly, Mike Soroka to Chris, Shea Langoliers, Ronel Blanco, Zach Eflin, Nathan Eovaldi. Chris selected Grayson Rodriguez, then Yu Darvish, and Ryan Walker to Scott. I am up here. I'm going to take a reliever as well. Someone I have is a breakout relief pitcher closer this season, Jeff Hoffman. And I believe we are 6 subscribers away from 30K. So
I put the comment up and I feel bad because it hides Scott. Like I did it earlier when he was talking, and that felt very bad because then you just see Scott like trying to.
Nobody
see
wants to look
over.
at this. It's okay.
Everybody loves seeing your living room.
Oh yeah. You know who's seen this living room? Cal Ripken. It's true. He's seen my living room.
I know. Ryan Howard has seen my office. That's a true thing.
Anytime Cal Ripken comes up in conversation, which is surprisingly often, that's what I say. He's seen my living room. Man, I don't like the things that are happening right now.
There are things happening. After I selected Jeff Hoffman, Max Muncy, who is much better in this format, Chris Bassett, Yohan Duran, Chris Bubich. So another Sparp off the board. There goes Jackson Holiday, Christian Campbell.
I really don't like what's happening. I shouldn't have taken Ryan Walker. I knew I shouldn't have done.
Yeah, all the RP, all the RP, or all the Sparps now. Chris Bubich, Nick Martinez just went. Yeah.
Never take a closer.
We are into
before the end of a head-to-head points draft.
Round 16, Dustin May, Brandon Pfaadt, and Nick Martinez. So more Sparps off the board. Tanner Houck goes, and Dustin May, followed by Trevor McGill. I am on deck. I am going to think about who I am going to take here. Dustin May rising up draft boards quite a bit. We talked about him the other day, Chris, with our buddy Nick Pollock.
Yeah, I struggle with Dustin May, especially. He feels like a guy I wish was RP eligible because I don't know how high the upside is, especially in a points league. He's going to probably be limited to like 5 innings early on in the season, especially. There are going to be times when they skip his workload. He basically hasn't pitched the last 2 seasons. It was wasn't Tommy John surgery, was it? It was like flexor tendon surgery. Yeah. And then
I think Dustin May is going to be kind of useless in this format, to be
honest.
That's my concern. Outings are going to be so short, and there are going to be so many interruptions. I think he's going to be great inning for inning, but
we hit 30K.
Not going to deliver. There we go, 30K,
31K by opening day.
Ooh, let's go 40K. Yeah, I don't have much interest in Dustin May in this format. I will say I was tilting not just about the Sparps going off the board, Nick Martinez and Chris Bubich, but also the fact that Max Muncy was taken during that run. I was targeting him for my utility spot. I mentioned the other day, I feel like we're undervaluing him in drafts this year, and he's especially good in this format because of how good the walk rate is. Trying to find the point per game number for Max Muncy, 3.09. Last year, and then also Jackson Holiday.
Yeah,
I could use a second baseman.
You got 3 hitting spots left because you've already drafted your full pitcher. Group and 2 bench pitchers.
I wanted Jackson Holiday also, not because I'm the biggest believer in Holiday, but in a format this shallow, it seemed like a last chance to get like potentially a real high impact guy. If he does have a breakthrough, it seemed worth the gamble in a shallow format like this. I am going to take one of the hitter spots I need, Dansby Swanson, just in case any wise guy out there thinks he needs a shortstop for his bench, and I end up starting somebody like Jeremy Pena in a points league. We don't want that to happen. Dansby Swanson, I think, is undervalued too. Prior in the years, like the 4 or 5 years leading up to this year, he's been considered a must start regardless of format.
Yep. I am. I took, so after you took Dansby Swanson, Tommy Edman went off the board. There's a chance he ends up with second base eligibility. If Andy Pajes is the starting center fielder. I took Shane Baz. Ryan Pepio went off the board. So there's we have our concerns about how those Rays pitchers are going to work in the new ballpark. Nobody has really come up with like a good explanation for why Tropicana Field was such a good pitcher's park. It wasn't just like, it's actually a fairly small ballpark in terms of the outfield dimensions, but
I know Willie Adames had issues with the batter's eye there.
So hitters seem to see the ball poorly. The ball moves differently there. It is the only just dome, like totally indoor stadium left in baseball, right? So
totally indoor?
Yeah,
that may be right. I'm not sure.
So from what I've seen, it might also be that because there's no wind at all, the ball just doesn't move the way people expect. So it has played better for pitcher than you would expect otherwise. And so it's possible that the entire Rays pitching staff is worse this season than we think it will be. But I'll take the flyer on Shane Baz.
I don't even care that they're not in Tropicana Field. It's where they're going. George M. Steinbrenner Field with the short porch like Yankee Stadium, but in Florida humidity.
Yep.
And Taj Bradley and Ryan Pepio especially, I think are going to get crushed by that since they're fly ball pitchers. Baz may too. Baz, I'm worried. Like he never got his slider back.
Yeah.
After Tommy John surgery, and he's gotten knocked around sometimes this spring. He had the low 3 ERA last year, but low strikeout rate too. I'm not sure Shane Baz is really back to being an impact pitcher in fantasy, or if he doesn't get that slider back, I'm not sure he ever will be. So I have big concerns about him. And then you add the venue on top of it. All right. I had a devious idea here while you were talking, Chris. I missed out on my potential breakout impact bat in Jackson Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
But I can go Matt Shaw still, who's looked pretty good, I have to say, now that he's playing regularly for the Cubs. He's past that health issue he had early. Third base is blocked currently by Jazz Chisholm, but I'm going to move Jazz Chisholm to second eventually and have Matt Shaw be my third baseman.
I mean, Matt Shaw's going to have second base eligibility before. Well, no, I guess he's probably not, right? Who's going to start at second base for them in Tokyo? It might be Shaw and Justin Turner starts at third, but we're assuming that by the third game of the season, Nico Horner will be ready and Shaw will move to third.
Probably John Birdie. John Birdie looks like, or maybe Vidal Brujan. Rather than like reorganize their whole infield, that's probably what they'll do.
Matt Shaw has not been officially announced as being on the Cubs opening day roster, but he did travel to Japan. And the way that works is they have like a travel roster of 6 players who aren't on the official roster, but can be promoted if there's an injury. I assume he will be on the active roster.
Let's catch people up on picks here. Where did we leave off, Chris?
I believe the last one we mentioned was Shane Baz. So we'll go Eugenio Suarez at pick 191. Reese Olson, his velocity was up about a mile per hour in his most recent start. Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt. I took Ryan Weathers, a little bit of a reach at 195, but again, at this point in the draft, just get the guys you're excited about because the waiver wire will be full of viable starters in this format.
Not a reach. I would have taken him, Chris, if you didn't.
Then Tanner Scott, Matt Shaw, Walker Buehler, Zachary Neto, who I think we talked about it on yesterday's podcast. I think it's going to be more like late April, early May at this point because I haven't seen him like swinging a bat or throwing at full speed yet. Then Joshua Lowe, Jose Soriano, who I've mentioned I like a little bit as a sleeper. Scott, I know you offered me a trade in the Dynasty League involving him that I will consider, although I'm leaning no. Gabriel Moreno, who
you need a closer too, by the way.
Gabriel Moreno hitting the ball much harder this spring, so that's interesting. Luis Severino, Mitch Keller, Pete Crow Armstrong, and JJ Bleday. So the reason I say get your guys at this point in the draft is you look at that whole list, and it's a lot of guys who are pretty replaceable. And that includes, I'm not talking bad about anybody. That includes Ryan Weathers. There's a very good chance that 2 starts into the season, it just doesn't go well for Ryan Weathers, and I'm dropping him.
You know, this is truly the get your guys format because it's shallow, A. So if you miss on a pick, okay, as long as you're active on the waiver wire, you can probably make up for it. And B, you don't have to juggle categories. You're not like, oh, I need steals right now, so I better take this guy, even though I want this guy more. You can, and that might be, you may have just touched on a reason why I like head-to-head points so much is because it's truly a matching up wits as opposed to matching up needs. And you can really like tailor a team to your own tastes more in this format than others. I never really thought about that before, but it's true.
All right. I am back. I had to go feed the cats. Let's go with that one.
I moved all my cat stuff out of the room for the 7 hours we're going to be in here.
After JJ Bleday, Max Meyer, another riser here in spring, David Bednar, Brandon Woodruff, and Tyler O'Neill. I am up. Last time I took
Were
Max
you
Scherzer-
gone? Were you gone for 30K, Frank? Did you miss the 30K celebration?
No, I was definitely here for that.
Oh, okay.
You missed it.
I didn't hear you celebrating, but
31K by opening day. 31K.
40K. Well, you're aiming too low.
31K by the end of the day.
Yeah, let's go. I am going to take Nestor Cortez. Nasty Nestor. Keep loading up those starting pitchers on the bench here. And Scott, you're up.
Yep, I just added him to my queue.
I think a theme of today is I'm going to not be able to keep up crossing off names on my tier sheet. So it's going to be bad when we get into some of those platforms where my own rankings aren't built into the room.
Oh, that's going to be madness.
It is. Hey, there's a Sparp still. I think I'm going to take him. It's kind of a semi-Sparp, but I do think he's going to start more than he relieves, and it's Drew Rasmussen.
Yep.
All right. Yes, we have. Do we have any confirmation of what his role is going to be at all for Tampa Bay, at least to open the season?
I think he's going to be sixth starter, like maybe swingman type. But as soon as there's an injury, which there will be an injury, if not, Taj Bradley melts down and gets sent to the minors.
Oh.
Rasmussen will be in at that point.
After Rasmussen, there was Ranger Suarez, and Chris, we are over to you.
Yeah, I'll just go with a boring pitcher who I think is kind of interesting, Tomoyuki Sagano. The problem, and look, having Shohei Ohtani on your team is not a problem. He's awesome. He's the best. The problem is when I'm looking at like bench hitters, like there's a couple of hitters that I really like left. One of them's a second baseman, but then I look at my team and I've got Ozzy Albies and I've got Shohei Ohtani at utility. So it's like things would have to go really poorly for me to ever start that guy unless he gains outfield eligibility, which he might. And I'll just say the name because it's Jonathan India and I'm the only one who likes him. But I think Jonathan India could be a must-start player in this format with his pretty good plate discipline. He walked 80 times last year, could score 95 runs in this Royals lineup. I like Jonathan India a lot.
Chris,
You spoke it into existence.
I'm sorry.
Until Jazz Chisholm is eligible at second base, I needed a second baseman, and I was counting on Jonathan India. But
Whoa, you jerk!
That's
He is a
unfortunate for you.
this is as bad as that time you denied me Kyle Schwarber.
No,
That was Frank. I have,
And that was worse also.
I have
No.
Brent Rooker or Marcelo Zuna on my team.
guys, we're way past that. Never happened. We're on to a new draft. It's a new day. After Chris selected Sagano, there was David Festa, Yandy Diaz, and we're into round 19, where we get Jonathan India, Justin Martinez, Jeffrey Springs to Chris, and good old Uncle Chuck, Charlie Morton. Scott, you are up.
I don't really like anybody who's left. These guys have been so good at drafting for this format that
Mhm.
I want to give a shout out to because we are drafting us three and listeners, and
Yeah.
you have been awesome. They have
They have
great
been.
so far. Everyone's on the ball. You know the format. Everyone's here. Everyone's drafting in a timely fashion. So thank you. All the drafts today will be done with other listeners. So let's hope they're as great as this group because draft one has gone very well.
All right, let's get weird. Let's go for a spring training favorite who might not even make the team, but whatever. I can drop him if he doesn't. Zebby Matthews.
Ooh,
Yeah.
spicy. I like it. Not even 4:00. Scott's getting
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah,
Should I get crazy then?
do it. This is
I
the
might
get your
get,
guys
I might
format.
get crazy.
Then it's time for Jack Leiter.
That's a
Come
good
on
one.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that he will play especially good in this format because I think he's going to be pretty inefficient and probably walk quite a few batters. But there are multiple injuries to the Rangers rotation. It sounds like Cody Bradford is going to start the season on the IL. I think Jack Leiter is going to be in the Rangers rotation. So
Yeah, I'm a little warmer to him after doing my big box score catch up yesterday. That spike changeup he has going, I think.
Justin Verlander was the other one I was considering. He just went as well.
You saw the 5 walks in the most recent start, and you were like, "I'm in."
No, I'm concerned about the control, and he's been home run prone too. So 2 of the 3 legs of the FIP triangle, Leiter has major issues, but that third leg could be a
Tons
huge
of strikeouts.
strikeout pitcher. So it's not like my favorite sleeper pick, but I'm going to put Jack Leiter in my deep sleepers article. Sure.
Another trendy spring riser is Casey Mize, who's just I think he's got like 13, 14 strikeouts in 9 innings so far. His velocity's up again. Splitter looks really good. He's throwing 3 different versions of a slider. He might have tinkered his way into being relevant, at least.
After I selected Jack Leiter, there was Taj Bradley. Edward Cabrera, who's dealing with an injury, might not be ready for opening day. Justin Verlander, I think that's a pretty good pick at this point. Kumar Rocker might have a chance. Never say never. Casey Mize, Luis Rengifo. And then into round 20, Mitch Spence, Cedric Mullins, Robert Suarez, Andrew Painter, Luis Heel, so a stash candidate there, will miss the first 3 months, and Logan O'Hoppe. I am back up, and I need another reliever.
Oh.
So I will go ahead and...
Wow.
Uh-oh.
I did not think that Sparp was going to get drafted. There's a Sparp that we haven't mentioned who looks locked into a rotation role. He was not among the 10 we've talked about all spring. Mitch Spence.
I was wondering why
make it.
I was wondering why he got taken.
Yeah, it looks like he's pretty much locked into a rotation spot for the A's right now.
There's a potential.
Probably not going to be good, but
there's another potential Sparp. Oh, Hayden Wesneski goes. That's not who I was referring to. But if Shane Smith ends up being a starter for the White Sox, he would be a Sparp.
Thank you for the reminder. He's another I keep forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be for the White Sox and probably short outings. So I don't know that he's really worth pursuing in this format, but it worth mentioning.
I was the one who selected Hayden Wesneski. I don't know if he's very good, but I think he's going to be in the Astros rotation, and he is another potential spark this season.
I think he's mildly interesting, yeah.
I'll take an injury stash here. I think the best injury stash, who hasn't been obviously just injured recently, and that's Shane Bieber.
Yep, a lot of upside there. Did you see the video of him talking about the injury the other day?
No.
That he hurt himself in warmups in his final start and just gutted through it. I think still had 11 strikeouts or something.
Wow. Yeah, he was awesome to start last season.
Yeah, he was really good.
And people were hyping him up. He went to Driveline in the offseason last year and looked like it was going to be a big season.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt a little dumb for calling him a bust before the year, but then he got hurt, unfortunately.
Chris takes Shane Smith a couple picks later. So
yeah, there were a couple of Sparps left that I had in my queue. One of them is pitching right now. But I just watched him. I just watched Luis Ortiz give up a home run to Jacob Stallings, so I'm not going to draft him.
So this is kind of a funny dynamic in these CBS head-to-head points leagues. We're drafting some pretty obscure pitchers, even though it's very shallow format, only 252 players drafted, and we're getting into some deep spring training sleepers. I think this being a smart head-to-head points group, they're just we all recognize we mostly want to fill out our bench with pitchers, and those hitters that you'd almost always see draft. I mean, there are some pretty high-end hitters left for Roto, Luis Garcia, Victor Robles, Nick Castellanos. They're just replaceable in this format. Who?
Luzardo's still out there? No, he's been taken.
Yeah, Luzardo's gone.
They're just I the standard. The threshold, the bar to meet for hitters at this point is very low. And did I say that right? Did I phrase that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Thank you for the real time.
I got you. Anytime.
Syntax check there. Yeah. So yeah, it's why stash one on your bench? You can just pick him up off the waiver wire if you need him.
After Shane Smith to Chris, there was Jordan Romano, Will Warren, and we are into the final round of the draft. Tyler Holton, Clark Schmidt. Chris, you are back up.
So there are many hitters who I like more than the guy I'm going to take, but let's do it. And if he doesn't make the team, he doesn't make the team, and I'll add one of those hitters. But let's take Cam Smith.
Ooh.
The only hitter on my bench, Houston Astros top hitting prospect. I really think he's going to make it sounds like they are giving him every chance.
Their outfield stinks. So.
Yes. He's going to play right. He played right field earlier this week in a minor league game. It sounds like they're planning on getting him some work there in a Grapefruit League game. So Cam Smith, I mean, he's only played 32 professional games. He may be overmatched, but he's looked really good so far this spring, and they really, really like him. And the way they talk about the intangible stuff, they really think he's ready for the jump. That's the biggest thing.
All right, let's catch people up on the final round of action. And latest picks, Michael Waka, Luis Garcia to Scott, and I selected Kenley Jansen. So Luis Garcia, who usually is a top 120, 130 pick in Roto, 245th in head-to-head points.
Yeah, it makes sense. His skills are best suited for Roto. Doesn't walk much, steals a decent number of bags. And also he's a part-time player, which is bad for head-to-head. It's just a short-term option for me, filling in at second base till Jazz Chisholm, till I can slide him over there, and then I can put Matt Shaw at third. And then I'll have to pick up a player for my utility spot. Maybe I should have drafted Brent Rooker after all.
No, you should have left him for me. That was good.
If I don't have to be intentional about the position, I could just pick up the best hitter off waiver wire. I imagine there will be several that are more worth starting than Luis Garcia in this format.
All right, I selected Kenley Jansen. So I've got two traditional closers with Hayden Wesneski on the bench. If he turns into an okay starting pitcher, then I could use him as a spark. After that, there was Nick Castellanos, Jameson Tyone, Evan Carter, Yuri Perez, another stash candidate, Caleb Durbin, not to Doc Eisenhower, and Tyler Stevenson. Last pick of the draft. I would assume that person's starting catcher. With the very last pick, you get a top 12 catcher. So that is maybe a reminder and a reason why you might want to wait to draft your catcher in a one catcher league. We did it. Draft one is in the books, and we actually made perfect time. Yahoo's coming up at 4:15. Boom.
Look at that. We are professionals.
And yes, I do want to thank all the listeners that were in that mock draft with us, because
they killed it. Everybody did a great job.
They kept it moving. They drafted very well. They knew which head-to-head points league players to take. And you know what? In the meantime, we've got a couple of minutes here. If you got some questions, throw them in the chat. We'll answer some of your YouTube questions. I will just pull up our teams just to see how they came together here. And Chris, take a look at yours. You've got Cal Raleigh, Josh Naylor, Ozzy Albies, Alec Boehm, Matt McClain, Fernando Tatis, Luis Robert, James Wood, and Shohei Ohtani.
I think it's solid. I feel like almost everyone I drafted might be better in Roto. So, that's not great, but I think it'll be fine. Pitching staff has got some upside, but I don't know. I don't think it's the best team I've ever drafted, certainly.
Your pitching staff, you got Corbin Burns, Robbie Ray, Shane Baz, Zach Gallen, Yusei Kikuchi, and then relievers Mike Soroka, Shane Smith. On the bench, Jeffrey Springs, Ryan Weathers, Grayson Rodriguez, Cam Smith, and Tomoyuki Sugano. So you got Burns, you got Zach Gallen, the D-backs, double D-backs. How about that?
Yeah.
And then you got Robbie Ray, who's been a big riser. So I feel like maybe normally you would have another kind of top tier pitcher here, Chris.
Yeah.
And then you kind of wait on those upside arms, like the Robbie Rays and the Yusei Kikuchis and guys like that.
Yeah, I probably took Robbie Ray too early. And if you slot in a different pitcher at the 95 or whatever it was, and him around later, it might have worked out a little better. So you know what? It's hard to draft.
The chat is saying, can we see Jack's team? Chad is saying his team is the best.
Is there a Jack?
No, I don't see.
Not seeing a Jack.
Let us know who else you were talking about. But I do also have to get over to the Yahoo side of things. So I don't know that we can look at any other teams here in the meantime.